He has very strong Utah ties, and he's also running for president. And did I mention he has an unusual first name? Today, we're pleased to welcome back to the show, Rocky Anderson.
Great to be with you, Chris.
How's the campaign going?
It's going well, especially under very difficult circumstances. We have a great staff of very low-paid, hard-working people. We've got volunteers in probably 30 or 35 states. We're getting on more and more state ballots. There are other parties who are nominating me to be their candidate.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm the Progressive Party candidate in Oregon. I'm the Independent Party candidate in New Mexico. It's looking really good in Connecticut to go on the ballot as the Independent Party candidate there. And then we're also on in Colorado as an independent and with the Justice Party in Mississippi and Utah. And then we have a road team out there in Rhode Island right now. We've got some great people in Minnesota getting signatures on petitions, and we're headed up to Idaho soon.
It sounds, and this may be a huge understatement, like there are many new lessons you're learning.
Well, one lesson is that this nation is so much less democratic than anybody would believe. And I mean with a small, lowercase d.
Even more than you thought so when you entered the race.
Well, yeah, I mean, I knew that the mainstream media, by and large, wouldn't cover third-party candidates anywhere near what they do to the major candidates, although I've been getting really pretty good treatment from the national media. I've been on a number of national programs, and we're getting more and more all the time, radio stations all over the country. We've reached millions of people. I think in terms of the number of appearances, we probably have had more than all the other third parties combined. But in terms of getting on the ballots, it's this crazy quilt system. Every state has their own peculiar rules. Utah's actually pretty good. We only need 1,000 validated signatures in Utah. We got on in Utah without much of a problem through the help of some really great volunteers. But California, for instance, requires 1,030,000 signatures, or if you can get, I believe it's 103,000 people to join your party to actually change their voter registration. Well, good luck with that. It's virtually impossible. The only way other candidates have done that, like Ross Perot, is to throw millions of dollars at professional signature gatherers. And that's not the way it ought to be in this country. You know, we went over to Eastern Europe, and I believe this was in the 80s, maybe early 90s, and talked about what democracy looks like, the kinds of things they need to do to be a real democracy. And this was in our documents, the United States, and there it talks about one of the things you need for real democracy is to allow people to form their own political parties and to compete on an equal basis. And yet we do just the opposite in this country.
Do you think it's deliberately hard, or just each state has done their own thing kind of hard?
I think they've made it hard enough in enough states that this duopoly of the Republican and Democratic Party, and if they wanted democracy, they could dish it up. But they do the same thing with ballot access they do with the presidential debates. Remember when the League of Women Voters used to sponsor the presidential debates?
They would invite my dad to be involved.
That's right. And they were independent. They ran the rules. They determined how many there would be, what the format is, who the moderator would be. So the Republican and Democratic parties got together. They formed the Presidential Debate Commission. They hijacked the debates away from the League of Women Voters, and now they have sole control. And as a result, they don't let on third-party candidates. Can you imagine what a difference it would make in this country in terms of the dialogue, the consideration of different points of view, If somebody like me or Jill Stein from the Green Party, Gary Johnson from the Libertarian Party, if we could take part in those debates so you weren't just hearing the same old tired sound bites from a Barack Obama or a Mitt Romney.
You know, I actually had this question later, but I'll ask it now. What are you going to do with the debates? Are you going to travel to any of the cities so you can at least try and get some press notice while you're there?
Well, you know what happened to Ralph Nader? He wasn't let on the stage, and he had tremendous support around the country. Somebody gave him a ticket that they had to be in the audience. He was going in to sit in the audience, and security came and grabbed him and wouldn't let him in. That's how controlled this is. So I certainly would welcome, and there have been some invitations. I think Al Jazeera might be scheduling a third-party debate. I think that RT Television has talked about doing that. I think that would be great, but the problem is my beef isn't so much with Gary Johnson or Jill Stein, certainly. My beef is with the Democratic and Republican parties who both feed at the same trough of special interest money, who continually betray the public interest because of the role of corrupting money in Washington, D.C. We need a real discussion about how we're going to eliminate this plutocracy and get back at least some semblance of democracy so that Congress and whoever inhabits the White House start acting in the public interest rather than simply the interest of these corporations and other sources of concentrated wealth.
So just to briefly recap before we go to break, how many states in whatever form, how many ballots are you on?
I think we're on in 7 or 8 now. We'll probably be on between 16 and 20 by the time this is over.
When everything's said and done.
Right.
Tell you what, we are talking with Rocky Anderson. We're going to pause for a brief round of messages. You're watching On the Record, and we will be right back. Welcome back. I'm Chris Vanocur. You're watching On the Record. We are talking with presidential candidate Rocky Anderson. Still sounds a little unusual for me to say that. Is it unusual for you to hear? Or
Yes.
are you used to it by now?
No, it's pretty daunting. And, you know, it's not that I think that we're going to win this election, but I think we can make a huge, huge difference, Chris. A lot of people say, why would you do this? And why did you form a new party? And I think it's important for people to understand that third-party candidacies, especially if they can get a lot of support, and that's why I encourage people like in Utah, if you're a Democrat, it doesn't matter in the presidential race with the Electoral College. Your vote doesn't count anyway. Why not cast a vote in dissent? Send the message, we're tired of this. We're tired of the warmongering. We're tired of targeting U.S. citizens for assassination. We're tired of these drone killings. We're tired of our president signing off on a bill passed through a bipartisan effort in Congress that would allow our government to go around and essentially kidnap you, take you away, detain you up to the rest of your life without legal representation, without charges, without trial, and without habeas corpus. Chris, this country is being transformed in dramatic ways, in ways that are absolutely unprecedented. And when I grew up, I never thought this would be allowed under our Constitution. I never thought it would be politically feasible. And the kinds of things that are happening now, we as a people, it's up to all of us to let those in office know we're not going to put up with it anymore. We're not going to put up with them toadying to Wall Street anymore, to the bankers. Why, after all this that's happened, is there not a move in Congress or in the White House to break up the banks that are too large to fail?
Do you think in Utah you're going to give President Obama a run for his money?
I don't know. I would hope that not only Democrats, but good mainstream Republicans will understand that we can make a real difference by sending this message. Shake up both of these parties. Let them know we're tired of them caving to Wall Street when it's our interests that are being hurt every single day. You know, think about it. The repeal of Glass-Steagall, which prohibited the concentrated ownership of investment banks, commercial banks, and insurance companies. That was done under President Clinton. He signed off on that. The Republicans and Democrats alike have caved to these financial institutions and have basically given away the farm. And then when they go down and they get bailed out, they still come out on top.
Oddly enough, this is one of my odd non sequiturs, I was reminded of that because they were just talking about that repeal under Clinton on the HBO show Newsroom.
Well, and it wasn't just the Glass-Steagall Act. The Commodity Futures Modernization Act of 2000. Now, this may sound fairly technical, but it was part of the move toward deregulation so that companies like AIG could sell essentially insurance policies to these banks that were buying up all these rotten mortgages and assuring them that if they lost money, then AIG would pay them off. AIG, because of the deregulation, didn't have to have any reserves. They didn't have to have anything when they were called upon to pay, and that's why the United States government poured in billions of dollars to bail out AIG. I think is a total fraud. There hasn't been one prosecution by the Obama administration of anybody on Wall Street for committing the kind of fraud that helped lead to the 2008 meltdown, which is still having horrendous consequences for the American people. So I just have to say, Chris, the power is in the American people. Just like in the Arab Spring, people understood, even though they had these dictatorships and they had to put their lives on the line, we can all organize, we can stand up together and say, we're not going to stand for it anymore.
That actually leads into my next question. Given the constraints or restraints on your campaign, how big a role does social media play?
Social media is everything. It was crucial in terms of the Arab uprisings, and it's how we're getting the word out. I mean, we're getting some good media, as I said. We've been on, and I urge people to go to our website, voterocky.org, look under news and media, and you can see there all the programs we've been on, the radio interviews, the newspaper articles.
You're getting this prime Sunday morning slot.
And thank you for that. But, and we take advantage of all of that we can, but social media is so absolutely crucial. That's where especially young people are going for their news, and then people can share things that are of interest to them. We put things up and they're shared all over the place. And we've got some great volunteers who have put together, I think, some of the best video spots in politics today. And so I urge people, go to that video site on our website, voterocky.org. Take a look at what's been done. We didn't pay 1 cent for any of that work. That was done out of passion and commitment to what we stand for.
And speaking of money, I would think the internet is one of your big tools in terms of raising funds.
It is. It's about the only way we can do it right now. We're not holding big fundraising events. We don't hold these tens of thousands of dollar dinners that these guys, you know, do the American people, I think they are understanding this more. I hear a lot more concern about the role of corrupting money in our system of government now than I ever have before. I used to sit on the board of Common Cause here in Utah, and people would say in polls, yeah, we want to clean it up, but it was never a dispositive issue for them when they went in to vote. Now I think more and more people are really concerned about it. But these folks aren't giving tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Goldman Sachs, through its own PAC and through its employees, gave over $1 million to Barack Obama 4 years ago. And then we wonder, why then did he surround himself with all these Goldman Sachs and all their other Wall Street cronies? And then there's no prosecution for the massive Wall Street fraud? Chris, our government is bought and paid for, and we need to put it to an end. And this is one way to do it.
Tell you what, we're going to pause for one last round of messages. You're watching On the Record, and we will be right back. Welcome back. You're watching On the Record. I'm Chris Vanocur. We're talking with presidential candidate Rocky Anderson. Tell me about your vice presidential candidate.
Luis Rodriguez is an incredible man. He lives in Los Angeles. He grew up in gangs, started out in gangs at age 11. Saw death and destruction, violence, drugs, suicides, murders, people going to prison. And his life story is truly a story of transcendence. He is an amazing poet. He started writing as a teenager, and he's written 15 books, published books now. Many of them poetry. He's written novels. He's written two just amazing memoirs. And he's got a story that everybody ought to read, especially young people, and especially young people that are getting hooked into gangs, or people who don't understand gangs, who don't understand what gangs offer young people when they don't have the kind of support they need in life, and that they find only in gangs in some parts of this country. So Luis is an incredibly talented, passionate man, bright, very committed to his community. He's doing a lot of work in gang intervention now, even in other countries. He just got back from El Salvador, where he's been working, mediating between two gangs, and actually worked out a peace arrangement between them. So his commitment to community, to his nation, to making things better, to trying to help young people see a better way, I don't think there's a better example than Luis Rodriguez, and I'm very proud that he's my running mate in this race.
Is this going to be your last campaign?
Well, I think you asked me that before, and I said yes. Absolutely, I'll never run again. I never really contemplated this happening, but I also never contemplated that our nation would be in the kind of condition it's in. So this is a very different kind of race. My other three races, I ran for Congress and twice as mayor, I was doing that to win. I mean, that was my end objective. My end objective now is to do what I can to organize people, to mobilize people, so that we all stand up together and that we change this nation, return to the rule of law, return to basic constitutional values, get away from this empire building and these wars of aggression, this violence as a first resort. I mean, for the President of the United States now to be proud to talk about his personal involvement in going through these baseball card-like biographies of suspected terrorists and determining who we're going to go kill, and in the process killing hundreds of innocent men, women, and children, civilians in these countries. And by the way, these are countries where Congress has not authorized acts of war. We're in Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, still flying unmanned drones over Iraq. And the people in these countries are furious. So it really is hurting our nation's security in the long run as we're ramping up this hatred and hostility toward the United States. Imagine how we'd be responding if a nation came over, invaded us, sent unmanned drones over, killing our brothers and sisters, our mothers and fathers, our children. I think that there would be some suicide bombers among us as well, planning to do the kind of harm to those invaders that these people now want to do to the United States. And we've got to stop this cycle. We can do it, but not going in the direction that we've been headed during the Bush and Obama administrations.
I was going to say to you, not worrying about whether you win or not must be kind of freeing. You can say whatever you want, but that was never really an issue with you.
No, it wasn't. You know, I mean, when I ran for Congress, I think I could have won that race if I'd said the politically correct things, but it was too important for me, especially on marriage equality, to dodge that issue. I'm not that kind of person. I want at the end of my life to look back and say I never dodged an issue. I never compromised like some of these people, like Jim Matheson, I think, does every single day in order to keep his seat in Congress. And I shouldn't just target him, but he happens to be the closest example of somebody who votes completely differently than what most of us would think would reflect fundamental democratic values.
You know, with same-sex marriage, and maybe I was thinking about this earlier, with that issue and decriminalizing marijuana, you were kind of way ahead of the curve, weren't you?
I was. In '96, I don't think anybody running for public office other than me was advocating marriage equality. And, you know, I had people from the GLBT community here coming to me saying, don't do that, that's too far out. And I said, you know, if we don't have people kicking the door open, we're never going to see this happen. Well, look at it. That was 1996. And now in 2012, in how many states we have marriage equality? We've got, it's a mainstream movement. And
the
many
president
nations
said
around
he would
the country.
support it.
Yeah, well, the president says that because it's election time, after he said for so many years his thinking was evolving on that issue. I mean, talk about a classic political response where he's not stating his real position, not taking a courageous point of view, and he still won't stand for federal protection for gays and lesbians when it comes to marriage. He says he favors it, but he's going to leave it to the states. Can you imagine him saying, well, I think we should leave racial equality or religious equality to the states and not having federal protection? I think he's a coward. And I think that he's shown that on this issue. I think he showed it with regard to health care. Chris, we will still have, after the Obama health care plan is fully implemented, some, according to the latest figures from the Office of Management and Budget, 30 million people without any essential health care coverage in this country. And it's still going to be the most expensive health care system in the world, and we're still going to see people by the hundreds of thousands taking out bankruptcy because of their high health care costs. We're the only country in the industrialized world where that happens.
Where are you going to be on election night?
I don't know. See what kind of invitations I get from you.
Sounds like you're saying maybe you'll do some analysis for us.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I did enjoy that. I can't remember. Oh, that was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know where we'll be.
That'd be quite a coup for us if you were here and you actually won.
Yeah, that would get some coverage for you. But I think that however we come out in this race, it's so important for people to understand the election is not the end of it. It's only the beginning. And for us to exercise our democracy, we have to stay fully engaged, and we need to continue to push.
Rocky Anderson, presidential candidate, thanks again for being with us.
Thank you, Chris.
And thank you for watching. On the Record will be back next week. Until then, I will be in the political back room.
The views expressed on this program are those of the guests and do not necessarily represent the views of KTVX, its employees, or station management.